Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian, and welcome to the weekly Cyber Report sponsored by Northrop Grumman. We're here at the Atlantic Council think tank at the conclusion of the presentation of a new report on cyber escalation, and joining us is Dr. Ben Jensen, who is a professor at Marine Corps University, American University, and I should say is a lieutenant colonel in the 75th Innovation Regiment, part of the National Guard.
U.S. Army Reserve.
U.S. Army Reserve. Belay my last, sorry about that. Fascinating report. You wrote it with Brandon Valentino of Cato and also a colleague of yours at Marine Corps University. Talk to us a little bit about what we know and what we don't know about cyber escalation, because folks for a long time in the cyber community and in the strategy community have been sort of overlaying nuclear rules or conventional deterrence rules, and you guys have found out that's not necessarily the case. What have you learned in the course of your study?
Well, what we've found so far is that not only is cyber escalation not what it's made out to be, it actually varies depending upon the country you want to study it in. The report that we put together was sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation in New York, and what we tried to do was look at how respondents to a survey experiment from Russia, Israel, and the United States actually recommended strategic response options used from a whole complement of multiple instruments of power to a hypothetical crisis. What we found from this set of survey experiments is that actually cyber was the way they choose to diffuse a crisis. It was a more viable option for undermining an adversary short of triggering dangerous escalation pathways. Now, what does that mean for us going forward? It means that, frankly, we probably need to, as you point out, collect a lot more data on how adversaries are actually using cyberspace. And one of the challenges in the U.S. government, especially for an academic, is that we have exquisite capabilities in communities who have some of that information, but we don't pool it in a way that allows us to collectively report. Actually, it's funny you mentioned the early Cold War. Social scientists and the military worked together at that point to fund things like the Correlates of War database, the Militarized Interstate Disputes database, the International Crisis Behavior dataset. These were academics, who by the way are cheap by government standards, actually getting together to document events so they could draw empirical observations and generalizable conclusions about how states compete. Our work is a tip of the iceberg into that direction.
And one of the key things, and I want to bring in the Solarium project as well, right? At the early part of the Cold War, President Eisenhower convened Solarium. You're part of that effort, as well as a couple of other participants on this panel. Angus King of Maine on the Senate is the chairman, and Mike Gallagher, Republican of Wisconsin, is on it from the House side. You can't deter unless you fully understand your adversaries. Do we fully understand our adversaries enough to know how to deter in this space?
All we know at this point is that our adversaries have chosen to undermine the essential components of American power: our military strength, our electoral institution, and even our own trust in each other in and through cyberspace. And I have unbelievably been blessed with the chance to work with two phenomenal legislators like Senator King and Congressman Gallagher, which, as you point out, is an amazing thing. People don't realize Congressman Gallagher actually wrote his dissertation when he was at Georgetown University on the Solarium Commission. So you have this wonderful reviving of true moments of American prescient strategic thought to come at a similar inflection point. How do we get around the fact that our adversaries are undermining us? Do we understand them enough? People often forget that one of the outputs of the Solarium process was entire movements to energize the U.S. intelligence community to do the type of studies you're talking about. How do you get into the mind of your adversary? In cyberspace, it's a little different. What we really need to do is find unclassified ways of pooling attack data that allow us to actually understand tactics, techniques, procedures, which we do have some really good work done with the MITRE attack profiles, for example, but really get into more the social science of it. Is China more likely to use cyber espionage than Russia? Is Russia more likely to use disruption than the United States? And Dr. Valeriano and I actually started that in our 2018 book with Oxford, Cyber Strategy, The Evolving Character of Power and Coercion. Where we need to go further, and I think Solarium will really start to do that, is actually getting to usher in a series of recommended executive action and legislative proposals that look at how to build some type of layered cyber deterrent that allows America to compete with adversaries from a position of strength. And from that position of strength, start to continue to maintain a prosperous free international order with international law that allows us all to prosper. But I can't stress enough as an academic, we can't help our nation get there until we do this type of research and start to build those type of data sets so that we can actually offer viable recommendations on how you're targeting Chinese Communist Party decision makers or Russian decision makers, because strategic interaction isn't about the average citizen. It's about how your foreign elite leaders are thinking, how their military leaders are thinking, how their business leaders are thinking. That's where we have to have a higher fidelity understanding, and I think we're on the road to get that.
And how long, in 15 seconds, how long is it going to take for us to get there? Because if you look at it, this is an escalated and disrupted situation that gets even more complicated when you have North Koreans, Iranians, and non-state actors playing in the pool, including with some of the technology that's our very own weaponized technology that's now in the hands of adversaries.
Yeah. So the simple answer is actually shorter than you think if we can have public and private sector collaboration. And part of the public good a government should produce is that it can incentivize market-based solutions. How is it that we actually work across the great strength of American industry with the depth of American political institutions to find ways that that collaboration can organically happen, building standards into 5G devices, finding ways to secure critical infrastructure? Those are what we would call in the deterrence literature denial. I am actually going to create a layer that makes it more difficult for those middle states and rogue actors to actually hold me hostage in my own connected networks that generate so much economic prosperity. So I think as this report comes out in early March, there'll be a whole series of recommendations in there that could quickly allow us to start to move in the right direction.
Dr. Ben Jensen of American University, Marine Corps University, who with Brandon Valeriano of the Cato Institute and the Marine Corps University were co-authors of What We Know About Cyber Escalation, which turns out not to be as much as we need to know. Sir, thanks very much. Fairwind's following seas, and looking forward to following up with you as you guys go through this process. Absolutely fascinating.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.